Have you ever woken up at 3 a.m.? Not from a noise, but from a nameless, deadly premonition. That night, I was lying in my bedroom, my hand reaching across the bed, only to touch my wife's cold, empty pillow. Through the thin curtain, I saw her silhouette huddled on the balcony, her arms wrapped around her shoulders, shivering in the bone-chilling cold. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking she was just having trouble sleeping. But as I quickly pulled back the comforter to bring out to her, I glanced at the floor and a cold dread washed over me. On the hardwood, stretching from the bedroom door to the balcony entrance, was a trail of wet patches, as if someone had stood there, dripping. My hands trembled as I yanked the door open. And what I saw that morning, it all started at dinner that evening. My older sister, Karen, had come up from her small town for a visit, bringing a prime cut of brisket with her as a gift. My wife, Sarah, always gentle and accommodating, bustled around, setting the table, making sure everything was perfect. Yet, it wasn't enough for my sister. "Brisket needs to be slow smoked with a good rub," she'd said. "Baking it like this just wastes the meat." I looked at Sarah. She just lowered her head in silence. I knew my wife was an excellent cook, but I chose to stay silent. Karen was my older sister, I was the younger brother, and arguing would only create more trouble. After dinner, Sarah went to the kitchen to clean up while I had a drink with Karen. She went on and on about everything, about how a wife should be this way and that. Then, she suddenly lowered her voice. "Michael," she whispered, "I've been noticing something. Your wife. She's been taking your money and sending it to her mother. I see her making discreet transfers every month." I froze. "What are you talking about? Sarah's not like that." Karen smirked. "Oh, really? Then why did I overhear her on the phone yesterday, saying something like, 'Just wait, Mom, I'll try to scrape a little more together and send it.' And where does she get that money? Isn't it from you?" My heart started to pound. I swallowed hard. Karen added more fuel to the fire. "You're just blindly trusting her. Girls from poor families who marry city guys, how many of them don't end up siphoning money to support their own folks? Just check your bank account and you'll see." I fell silent. I didn't want to believe it, but her words cut deep into my mind. That night, lying next to Sarah, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I secretly opened my phone and checked our joint account statement. My heart felt like it stopped when I saw 3 Zelle transfers, each for $500, all to an unfamiliar account. Blood rushed to my head. I gasped for air. So, what Karen said was true. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating. I wanted to throw off the covers, shake Sarah awake, and confront her right then and there. But I held back. I told myself I had to get to the bottom of this, but I had to be smart about it. The next morning, as Sarah was hanging laundry on the balcony, I went to stand beside her. I tried to keep my voice normal. "Hey, honey, is your mom sick or does she need money for anything lately?" Sarah flinched, her face turning pale. She stammered, "No, my mom's fine. Why do you ask?" The way she avoided my gaze made my blood boil again. I lowered my voice, menacingly. "Then who were the 3 transfers totaling $1,500 last month for? And don't tell me you saved it from the grocery money." Sarah froze, her hands gripping the clothesline tightly. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Just then, my sister, who must have heard us from downstairs, came up. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, her eyes full of insinuation. Sarah's silence drove me mad. I screamed, "I'm asking you, where did that money go? Tell me!" Sarah burst into tears, her voice trembling. I just wanted to help." Before she could finish, my sister cut in. "Help who? Help your family, right? I told you so. The kind that leeches off their husband, only thinking about their own family." That comment was like gasoline on a fire. I completely lost control. I pointed to the balcony, where the November air was already turning frigid. "Go out there and think long and hard about what you've done. When you're ready to tell the truth, you can come back in." Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked at me, then at my sister, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Without a word, She stepped onto the balcony. The glass door slammed shut. I stood there, my hands still trembling. I looked through the frosted glass and saw her collapse, her small back shaking in the cold wind. My sister walked over and patted my shoulder. "You have to be firm like that, or she'll get spoiled." I didn't answer. I looked at the door, then I slid the bolt and turned the key in the lock. Not to open it, but to lock it tight from the inside. I lay on the bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The clock struck 11 p.m. The room was pitch black, except for the streetlight filtering through the blinds, casting a faint stripe of light on the wall. I listened. It was strangely quiet. Not a single sound from the balcony. She must still be angry, I told myself. Women can hold a grudge. Let it be. We'll sort it out in the morning. But I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned. The ceiling fan whirred overhead. The blades, dusty from not being cleaned, creaked with each rotation like a faint moan. I usually hated that sound. But tonight, I focused on it, trying to avoid hearing another sound. The sound I dreaded most right now. The silence from the balcony. 12 a.m. I sat up and reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. My hand trembled, spilling a few drops. I cursed under my breath, wiping my hand on the bed sheet. Then I lay back down. I closed my eyes, trying to force myself to sleep, but my mind was filled with chaotic images. Sarah, huddled out there. Is she cold? Or has her anger subsided? And is she now leaning against the railing, waiting for me to open the door? I shook my head, dispelling the thought. If she wanted to come in, she'd have to knock. And I hadn't heard any knocking. 1 a.m. I was still wide awake. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness. I could clearly see the grain on the wooden wardrobe opposite me. I started noticing the smallest sounds. A motorcycle speeding by on the street, a distant dog barking, the drip of the faucet in the bathroom, but no knocking, and no sound from the balcony. Absolute silence. A sense of unease began to creep in. I thought, she's usually quick to anger but also quick to forgive. Normally, after a fight, she'd only be mad for a few hours before cuddling up to me to make up. Why is it taking so long this time? 2 a.m. I couldn't take it anymore. I shot up in bed and turned on the night lamp. The dim yellow light cast eerie shadows on the wall, making the room feel even more desolate. I looked towards the balcony door. The frosted glass was still, the bolt still firmly in place, just as I had locked it. I glanced down at the base of the door. The wet trail from earlier was still there, but it had mostly dried, leaving just a damp patch. I swallowed, my throat dry. 3 a.m. I got up and walked barefoot to the door. Each step I took was a cold print on the floor. I pressed my ear against the glass door, listening. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid it would drown out any other sound. But no. I heard nothing. No sigh, no sniffle, not even the sound of Sarah calling my name like she always did when her anger subsided and she wanted to reconcile. I whispered through the crack in the door, "Honey, are you asleep?" Silence. I tapped lightly on the glass twice. Knock, knock. Silence. An icy chill ran down my spine. I fumbled with the bolt. My hands were shaking so badly it took me several seconds to pull the latch. Finally, the door swung open. A gust of cold wind rushed in. The balcony was empty. I looked around frantically. From one corner to the other, there was only a few potted plants, the clothes rack with laundry still hanging, and on the tiled floor, a small puddle of water. I looked up at the railing. There, the print of my wife's shoes was clearly visible, the toes pointing outward. I scrambled to the railing and looked down. The street was deserted, silent under the pale yellow streetlights. Beneath the sycamore tree by the roadside, there was a white heap. I couldn't see it clearly, and I didn't dare to. I stood there, my hands gripping the cold railing, my nails digging deep into the peeling paint. The night wind howled, messing up my hair. I looked down at my own bare, dusty feet. If she's okay, why did she leave? If she left, why are her shoes still here? If she's not okay, why didn't I hear anything? A dozen questions swirled in my head, and above all, one question echoed, repeating like a curse. Why did I lock the door? Why? Dawn broke, the murky white light piercing through the morning mist, illuminating my gaunt face. I had been standing there for 3 hours, leaning against the doorframe, my eyes fixed on the empty space below. My whole body was numb, my bare feet frozen, but I couldn't move. I was scared. I was scared of the moment I would have to face the truth. Finally, as the first rays of sun began to light up every corner of the street, I heard the frantic thud of footsteps on the stairs. My sister, her face drained of all color, rushed up to the balcony. She was panting, her hair a mess, her trembling hand pointing down. "Do you see, down there, that white heap under the tree?" I didn't answer. I just nodded, my eyes still glued to it. My sister crept closer to the railing, her body trembling, trying to get a better look. Then she let out a heart-wrenching scream, covered her face with her hands, and collapsed onto the tiled floor. "Oh my God! The girl! She couldn't finish," just sobbed hysterically. My heart felt like it stopped. I looked down at my sister, at her trembling hands pointing towards the tree. I swallowed hard, my throat so dry, it felt like I had swallowed broken glass. I gripped the railing tighter, my knuckles turning white from the force. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them. I had to go down. I had to see for myself. I turned and walked, each step heavy, back into the room. My legs felt like they were made of lead. Every step was a monumental effort. I reached for the jacket hanging on the bedpost, but my hand was shaking so much it fell to the floor. I bent down to pick it up, fumbling for a few seconds before I could grasp it. Then I opened the drawer for my keys, but my hand trembled again. The keys clinked against each other, then fell to the floor. The sound echoed in the silent room, shockingly loud. I picked up the keys and walked out into the hallway. The stairs stretched down, long and dark. I took them one step at a time, my hand gripping the cold banister. Each step left a wet footprint from my sweaty feet. When I reached the ground floor, I pushed open the heavy front door. It felt like it was trying to hold me back. As I stepped outside, the morning chill hit my face, making me shiver. The street was quiet, with only a few early morning joggers. They were gathered in a small group, whispering, pointing towards the sycamore tree. I walked in that direction. The closer I got, the heavier my legs became, my knees feeling like they could buckle at any moment. I saw a heap of white fabric crumpled at the base of the tree. It was my wife's nightgown, the one she was wearing last night. I stopped, my entire body rigid, the blood in my veins seeming to freeze. I wanted to close my eyes, but they remained wide open, staring at that white heap. And then I saw a hand, a small, pale hand, sticking out from the fabric. The fingers were spread, clawing at the damp earth. On the ring finger, her wedding ring was still there, glinting in the morning sun. I felt nothing. I just stood there, watching. The passers-by looked at me, whispering. Someone ran off to call the police. Someone else approached, wanting to ask what was wrong, but I heard nothing. All sound was muffled. I could only hear my own heartbeat and, in my head, a single question echoed, repeating endlessly, "Why did she jump? Why did she jump?" I took a few more steps. Closer, I saw her face. It was turned to the side, her hair fanned out, covering half of it, but I still recognized her. It was my wife. She lay there, motionless, like a discarded doll. And then I saw it. I saw her other hand, clenched into a tight fist, so tight that the knuckles were white. Protruding from her fist was the corner of a piece of paper, a crumpled note. I knelt, reaching out with a trembling hand to pry open her stiff fingers. It took several minutes before I could get the note out. I unfolded it. It was a piece of paper torn hastily from a notebook, with just a few lines of scrawled handwriting, as if written in a hurry. I read it, and I froze. I read it again, and again. My lips moved, but no sound came out. I called her name, Sarah. No answer. I ran. I ran like a madman down the street, screaming my wife's name until my voice was hoarse. Sarah! Neighbors opened their doors, their strange eyes fixed on me. Someone called out, "Hey, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I just ran. My bare feet slapped against the cold pavement. Small pebbles cut into my soles, a stinging pain. But I felt nothing. I ran from one street to another. I looked behind every tree, every bush, in every dark corner. I overturned piles of trash bags on the curb, sending rats scattering in a panic. An old woman on her way to the market saw me, shook her head, and muttered, "That poor boy must have seen a ghost." I didn't care. I just wanted to find my wife. Then, I remembered my phone. I pulled it from my pocket, my hand shaking so much I almost dropped it. I dialed her number. The automated voice replied, "The person you are calling is not available." I called again and again. Still that same emotionless voice. I buried my face in my hands, gasping for breath. I ran back home, up the stairs, and into our room. I looked around. Sarah's slippers were still neatly placed at the foot of the bed. Her phone was still on the table next to a half-empty glass of water, the low battery indicator blinking red. I picked it up. The screen showed a missed call from an unknown number. At 3:17 a.m., I called back. No one answered. My sister then ran up from downstairs, her face ashen. She grabbed my arm, her voice trembling. "What happened, Michael? Did you find her?" I shook my head, my eyes still glued to the phone screen. My sister let go of my arm, stumbled back a few steps, and sank onto the bed. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. "Oh God, is this my fault? My big mouth?" I looked at her. In her eyes now was real panic. Tears started to stream down her face. She covered her mouth, sobbing. "It's all my fault. I just had to run my mouth. I pushed you." She couldn't speak anymore, just buried her face in her trembling hands. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, looking at her, my heart in turmoil. Part of me wanted to blame her, but another part knew that the one most to blame was me. It was me who had locked that door. I turned back to the table and picked up Sarah's phone again. I opened her messages. The most recent was an unsent draft, written at 2:53 a.m. The message was just a few words. "I'm so sorry, but I can't take it anymore. My mom is very sick. I needed the money urgently, but I was afraid you'd worry if you knew." The message was unfinished, unsent. My heart felt like it stopped beating. I read and reread those lines as if I couldn't believe my eyes. So the money was for her mom's medical bills. So she was silent because she was afraid I'd worry. And me? I didn't ask. I didn't give her a chance to explain. I just listened to my sister, got angry, and threw her out on the balcony in the middle of the night. I collapsed to the floor, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. Tears began to flow, hot and fast, down my cheeks. I could never have imagined it would turn out like this. I looked up at the balcony door, at the frosted glass that I had locked so tightly last night. I slammed my fist on the floor, the pain excruciating. I was a terrible husband. I was a monster. Just then, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered it immediately, my voice hoarse. "Hello? Hello, who is this?" On the other end, a calm, female voice spoke. "Excuse me, are you the husband of a Miss Sarah Johnson? This is Dr. Evans from the county hospital's emergency room. Miss Johnson is here. Can you come right away?" My own voice was a raw scream into the phone. "Hello, what happened to her? Is she okay?" But the voice on the other end was clinical. "Please come to the county hospital emergency room as soon as you can." Beep, beep, beep. The call ended. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to that soulless tone. Then I bolted. I ran. I ran out of the room, down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold tiles. My sister called after me, "Michael, where are you going? Where?" I didn't answer. I threw open the front door and jumped on my motorcycle. The keys. Where were the keys? I frantically checked my pockets, my hands shaking. Not there. I jumped off the bike, ran back up to the room, tore apart the bed sheets, and finally saw them under the bed. I bent down to grab them, hitting my head hard on the bed frame, but I felt no pain. I ran back down again, started the engine, and the bike shot off into the pale dawn. The streets were deserted, with only a few people out for a walk. I twisted the throttle all the way. The engine roared, tearing through the quiet, a red light. I didn't stop. I sped straight through the intersection. The sound of car horns blared behind me. I didn't care. I just wanted to get to the hospital as fast as possible. The handlebars vibrated violently in my trembling hands. My numb fingers gripped them tightly. In my mind, 1,000 fragments of memory flashed and overlapped. Sarah's face as she stepped onto the balcony. The last look she gave me, no resentment, no anger, just a profound sadness, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. I shook my head, trying to push the image away. No, she's fine. She'll be okay. But why the hospital? Why the emergency room? I replayed every small detail of last night. When she was serving dinner, she looked at me and smiled. Why didn't I notice that smile yesterday? It was a little forced, a little tired. When my sister talked about the money, she just lowered her head in silence. I thought she was admitting guilt. It turned out she was silent because she couldn't speak, because she was afraid I would worry. And me? I didn't give her a chance. I just looked at the numbers in the account, at my sister's words, and condemned her. Tears started to stream from my eyes. The cold morning wind whipped against my face, making them sting. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. I deserved to cry. I deserved to suffer this feeling. I was the worst husband in the world. From a distance, I could already see the familiar Red Cross sign. My heart pounded erratically. I stopped the bike right in front of the entrance, almost falling because I couldn't get the kickstand down in time. I ran inside. The hospital lobby was already crowded. The sharp, acrid smell of disinfectant filled my nostrils. A smell that I now associated with my own personal nightmare. The sound of children crying, families whispering, and the PA system calling out patient names echoed through the hallway. I ran to the reception desk, panting. "Excuse me, I'm looking for a patient, Sarah Johnson. She was just brought to the ER. Where is she?" The nurse looked up at me, her eyes filled with something like pity. She answered slowly, "Let me check for you, sir." One moment. Then she looked down and typed on her keyboard. I stood there, my hands gripping the counter, my whole body shaking. Every second felt like an eternity. I looked around, at the strange faces waiting, at the closed doors of the patient rooms. The nurse looked up at me. "Patient Sarah Johnson is currently in emergency room 3, on the second floor. Take the stairs at the end of the hall and turn right." I didn't even have time to say thank you before I was running towards the stairs. My footsteps echoed loudly on the steps. When I reached the second floor, I ran down the hallway. On both sides were long benches filled with patients' families. Some were holding their faces in their hands. Others stared blankly into space. Emergency room 3. The white door was shut tight, the red light above it illuminated. I stood in front of that door, not daring to enter. My heart felt like it had stopped. I raised my hand, trembling, about to knock, but my hand froze in midair. What if? What if she didn't make it? What if I never got to say I'm sorry? Just then, the door opened. A female doctor in a white coat stepped out, her face tense. She looked at me and asked in a dry voice, "Are you the family of patient Sarah Johnson?" I nodded, unable to speak. The doctor looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "Please come in." I stepped into the emergency room. The bright, white fluorescent lights glared off the cold tile floor. The overwhelming smell of antiseptic made me want to vomit. Inside, doctors and nurses were gathered around a bed. I couldn't see my wife. I could only see the white curtains drawn around it and the silhouettes of people moving behind them. The doctor led me to a corner of the room and pulled a curtain for privacy. She looked at me, her expression serious. "You are the patient's husband?" I nodded, swallowing. My throat was completely dry. How is she, doctor?" The doctor didn't answer right away. She looked at the chart in her hand, then looked back up at me. "Her condition is temporarily stable, but we found some abnormalities." My heart, which had felt a crushing weight, lifted at the words temporarily stable. But her next words made me freeze. "Abnormalities? What kind of abnormalities?" The doctor stared at me. I need to ask you a few questions. Please answer them as accurately as possible. I nodded, my mind reeling. The doctor began. Last night, did your wife eat or drink anything unusual? Any strange food or medication? I shook my head. No. My wife had a normal dinner: brisket, steamed vegetables, a salad. The doctor jotted down notes, then asked again. During the meal, did she show any unusual symptoms, like nausea, dizziness, or stomach pain? I tried to remember. No. She seemed normal, eating just like always. The doctor frowned. Are you sure? Perhaps you didn't notice. I was silent. She was right. I hadn't been paying attention at all. Last night, I was only focused on what my sister had said, on the numbers in our bank account. Did I even watch my wife eat? Did I ask her how she was? No, I did nothing. I just sat there, resentful, angry, and didn't even speak to her. Tears welled up in my eyes again. I shook my head. My voice choked. I don't remember clearly. We had a misunderstanding last night. I wasn't paying much attention. The doctor looked at me, her expression strange. She continued, and after the meal, what did she do? Did she drink anything else? Did anyone visit your home? I shook my head. No one came over. It was just my sister and us. My wife cleaned up, and then we argued. I didn't dare to tell her about the balcony. I didn't dare to say that I had thrown her out and locked the door. Shame and guilt were suffocating me. The doctor jotted down more notes. Then she paused and looked at me, her voice dropping. Do you know if your wife has been taking any kind of medication? Any medication at all? Even supplements, herbal remedies, or vitamins? I was surprised. Medication? No, my wife is healthy. She doesn't take any medication. Maybe some iron pills she takes occasionally. But why are you asking, doctor? Is something wrong with my wife? The doctor was silent for a long moment. She looked at me, then towards the hospital bed, then back at me. In her eyes, I could read hesitation and a deep, unspoken concern. Finally, she spoke slowly, each word deliberate. When she was brought in, the patient was in a comatose state. Her pupils were constricted, and her heart rate was abnormally slow. We ran an emergency blood test. The results show that in her blood, there is a large amount. She paused, looking directly into my eyes. My whole body tensed, my heart pounding. A large amount of what? I held my breath. The doctor continued, her voice echoing in the quiet emergency room. A large amount of sleeping pills. Enough to be fatal if she hadn't been brought to the hospital in time. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. Suicide, my wife. She was a gentle soul, but I never thought she could do something so drastic. Doctor, are you sure you're not mistaken? My wife. She couldn't. The doctor shook her head and handed me the lab report. The results are clear, sir. The concentration of sleeping pills in her blood is very high. We had to perform an emergency gastric lavage. I took the paper, my hand shaking violently, looking at the numbers and words without understanding any of it. My head was spinning. Suicide. She was trying to commit suicide, and I had locked the balcony door, leaving her out in the cold night. I had thought she was just angry, that she'd cool down in a few hours. I never imagined she had taken pills before that. I never imagined she went out onto the balcony not to get away from me, but to wait for death. The doctor looked at me, her eyes filled with meaning. Do you know if your wife has been using sleeping pills regularly, or did she just recently buy them? I shook my head. I don't know. She never complained about not being able to sleep. I never saw her take any pills. The doctor made a note, then told me, please wait here for a moment. We need to run some more specialized tests. There are a few other indicators that are also abnormal. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. Chaotic thoughts swirled in my mind. Why would she do this? Just because of a few $1,000s? Just because I got angry and threw her out? Or was there something else? I remembered the past few days. Sarah had often been tired, often sitting alone, lost in thought. When I asked, she just said she had a cold, that it was nothing. I believed her. I didn't pay any more attention. About 20 minutes later, the door to the emergency room opened. The doctor came out, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her was a middle-aged man, also in a white coat, probably a doctor from another department or the head of the department. They both walked towards me, their faces tense. My heart started beating faster. What was going on? Why were there so many people? The female doctor spoke. "Sir, we just received the results of the additional tests, and we discovered something very concerning." She paused, looking at her colleague. The man stepped forward, holding a file. He pointed to it. "In your wife's blood, besides the sleeping pills, we also found a small amount of a strange substance. This substance is not a component of any common sleeping pill." I was bewildered. "A strange substance? What is it?" The doctor looked at me intently. "It's a type of industrial chemical, often used in agricultural preservation or illegally mixed into pesticides. It's extremely toxic and can cause liver, kidney, and nervous system damage if it accumulates over time." I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. Industrial chemicals? Pesticides? My wife had nothing to do with those things. I shook my head vehemently. "That's impossible. My wife is a homemaker. She's never been exposed to things like that. You must be mistaken." The doctor's voice was grave. "We ran the tests twice, and the results were the same. And it's not just in her blood. This substance has been absorbed into her body for quite some time. It's not a recent exposure." I collapsed back into the chair, speechless. In my mind, 1,000 questions arose. Who? Why? How? I looked at the two doctors, pleading. "So, is my wife going to be okay? Can you save her?" The female doctor sighed. "We are doing our best, but her condition is very complex. She may have taken the sleeping pills to commit suicide, but the underlying cause of her weakened state is this poison." She paused, then continued, her voice filled with insinuation. "I need to ask you a very important question. Please think carefully before you answer. Recently, has your wife eaten or drunk anything out of the ordinary? Has anyone given her anything to eat, drink, or use? Anyone at all, including family members?" That question was like a flash of lightning in my mind. Family members. My sister. I remembered a few days ago, she had brought some wild greens from her town, saying they were a specialty from a friend, very healthy. She told my wife to make a soup with them. Sarah had even asked, "What kind of greens are these?" My sister just laughed and said, "They're delicious wild greens. Just cook them and you'll see." And I remembered last night, at dinner, we had that soup. I thought it tasted a bit bitter, but I figured that's how wild greens were. Sarah ate it too. She even served me some. But my sister, she said she was full and didn't have any soup. I looked up at the doctor, my face ashen. My lips trembled, and it took me a moment to form a sentence. There were some greens my sister brought. We had them in a soup last night. The doctor's gaze was sharp as a knife. "What kind of greens? Is there any left? Can you bring it here?" I left the hospital in a daze. My mind felt like it had shut down, with only the doctor's words echoing in my ears. "Bring it here immediately. The sooner, the better." I raced home on my motorcycle, my heart heavy. The house I once thought was a sanctuary now appeared before me like a mysterious crime scene. I stood at the door, my hand trembling as I inserted the key. The door opened, and the familiar space greeted me. But why did it feel so cold and alien today? I stepped inside, each heavy footstep echoing on the tile floor. I looked around, not with the eyes of a homeowner, but with the eyes of someone searching for clues. The living room was neat and tidy as always. My wife's glass was still on the table, half full. I picked it up and sniffed it, no strange smell. I put it down and looked at the bottom of the glass, a faint, cloudy residue. I didn't know what it was. It could have just been sediment from the filtered water, but now it seemed suspicious. I carefully placed the glass in a plastic bag and put it in my backpack. I went up to the bedroom. The room was the same, but one thing caught my attention. On Sarah's vanity, the cosmetics were arranged neatly, but a small jewelry box was out of place. I opened it. The earrings and necklaces were still there, but her wedding ring was gone. The wedding ring she always wore, never taking it off. I tried to remember, back at the base of the tree, did I see it on her finger? I tried, but I couldn't recall. The scene was too chaotic. I couldn't see clearly. I went out to the balcony. The glass door was still closed, but I noticed a smudge on the handle, like oil or sweat. I looked down at the floor. The wet patch from last night was dry now, but on the tile, right next to the door, was a long, thin, black line. I turned on my phone's flashlight. It was a strand of hair. But it wasn't my wife's. Her hair was long and black. This strand was shorter and light brown. Whose hair was it? I picked it up carefully and put it in a bag. I stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was still cold. The potted plants my wife cared for daily were still green and healthy. I looked down to where she had lain. Then I looked up at the railing. Her shoe print was still there, but I saw another, fainter mark, as if someone else had stood there and tried to wipe it away. I leaned over, searching. In a hidden corner of the balcony, behind the largest plant pot, I found something. A cigarette butt. I don't smoke. Neither does my wife. My sister? I'd never seen her smoke. So where did this cigarette come from? I picked it up. The filter was still white, not damaged by the elements. The cigarette was relatively new, probably smoked last night or early this morning. I put it in the bag with the strand of hair. As I was looking around, I heard a noise from the stairs. Footsteps, familiar footsteps. My sister was coming up. She entered the room, her face still showing panic. But when she saw me on the balcony, her eyes narrowed slightly. A fleeting glance, but I caught it. "You're back? How's Sarah? Is she okay?" she asked, her voice sounding concerned, but it felt forced to me. I looked at her in silence for a moment. Then I asked, my voice as calm as I could make it, "Karen, besides Sarah and me, was anyone else here last night? Did you see any strangers in the house?" My sister's face changed color, a quick flash, then back to normal. "A stranger? Of course not. I went to bed early last night. I didn't see anyone." "Why do you ask?" she answered too quickly, too smoothly, as if she had rehearsed it. I stared into her eyes. She avoided my gaze. "Well, I found this cigarette butt on the balcony. I don't smoke, neither does Sarah. Do you know who does?" I held out the cigarette. She looked at it, her face turning pale. I don't know. Maybe the neighbor's kid threw it over, or one of your friends who came over. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the balcony had a screen. How could anyone throw it over? I said nothing. Just put the cigarette back in my pocket. She stood there, her hands clasped together. I noticed they were trembling slightly. I pressed on. "Karen, those greens you brought the other day, do you have any left? I want to cook them." My sister flinched. "Greens? Oh, the wild greens? They're all gone. We cooked them all last night, remember? Is that so?" "That's a shame," I said. "The doctor said Sarah might have food poisoning and wants to test the food from yesterday. I was planning to take it for testing." My sister's face went white. Her lips moved, but she couldn't speak. After a moment, she stammered, "Food? Food poisoning? How could it be? Those greens were clean. My friend in the country grew them herself and gave them to me." I looked at her without blinking. "Which friend? Karen. So I can ask her if she grew anything unusual. Or maybe you could give me her number, and I can ask her to check for me." My sister took a step back, her face ashen. Her number? "My friend, I don't remember. It's been a while since we talked. Anyway, Michael, I'm sure it wasn't the greens. It's probably the weather, or because she's weak." I didn't say anything more. I looked around the room, at my sister. Suddenly, everything seemed different. The familiar walls, the cherished objects, now seemed to be looking at me with suspicion. And my sister, the sister I had always trusted, stood before me with a face full of the cracks of deceit. I left the room and went downstairs. At the bottom of the stairs, I paused and looked back up. My sister was still standing there, her figure a blur in the dim light. A huge question echoed in my mind, repeating over and over, "Besides us, who else was here last night?" I didn't go back to the hospital. I went straight to my best friend's place. He's a police officer. His name is David. We grew up together, been friends for over 20 years. We met at a coffee shop near his precinct. He took one look at me and asked, "What's wrong with you?" You look like you've seen a ghost. I didn't answer, just pulled everything out of my backpack. The glass, the strand of hair, the cigarette butt. Then I told him everything from the beginning. David listened in silence, not interrupting once. When I finished, he looked at me, his expression turning serious. You know, Mike, this isn't just a family matter anymore. I swallowed hard. I know, that's why I came to you. David picked up the cigarette butt, examined it, then the strand of hair, then the glass. He asked me, "Does anyone know you took these things?" I shook my head. "Just me and my sister. I just came from home." David nodded. "Okay, leave it to me. I'll send these for analysis, but this has to be kept completely secret. Don't let anyone know, especially not your sister." I looked at him, worried. "But what if it's true? What if there really was poison?" David sighed. "If it's true, then this isn't just your problem anymore. It involves the law, a person's life. At that point, I'll have to report it to my superiors, and we'll have to launch an official investigation." I sat there, stunned. The law, investigation, words I never thought would be part of my life. David looked at me, his voice low. "Do you realize that if we find out someone intentionally poisoned your wife, it's a very serious crime? And if that person is a family member, it's even more unforgivable." I trembled. "My sister, could she really have done that? And if so, why?" I looked at David, pleading. "What should I do now? I just want to know the truth." David put his hand on my shoulder. "For now, you go home. Go home and wait. Don't do anything. Don't ask your sister any more questions. Don't show any sign of suspicion. If it is her, and she knows you're suspicious, she'll try to cover her tracks. That will make things even more complicated." I swallowed and nodded. David continued, "Wait for me. I'll contact the lab, get them to expedite the analysis of these items. As soon as I have the results, I'll call you. But remember, absolutely no rash moves. This is a serious matter involving the law and a human life. You can't do anything on your own. Got it?" I went home in the drizzling afternoon rain. The house was empty and dark. I turned on the lights, sat down on the sofa, and looked around. Everything was the same, but it felt so cold. My sister was in her room, the door closed. Not a sound. I sat there, listening to the rainfall, to the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. Time crawled by. I stared at my phone, waiting for David's call. Every time it buzzed, my heart leaped, but it was always junk mail or a spam call. I sat there wondering, if the test results showed poison, how would I face my sister? And if it wasn't her, then who? Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside the house, I sat alone, surrounded by countless unanswered questions. I sat there in the dark house, listening to the rain, my mind in a turmoil. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of everything, but the more I tried, the more tangled it became. My sister, Karen, the older sister I had always respected. Since we were kids, she had taken care of me in place of our mother. She was the one who taught me to write, who protected me when I was bullied. And now, in my mind, she was the prime suspect. I remembered the look in her eyes when I asked about the greens. It wasn't concern for her sister-in-law. It was fear. Fear of being caught. But why would she do it? What grudge did she have against Sarah? My wife was gentle. She never raised her voice to anyone. My sister, though a bit harsh and critical, I never thought she could harm anyone. Could it be about money? Or jealousy? I shook my head. No, it can't be. Then I thought of my mother. She lives in another state. Visiting occasionally, she and Sarah got along well. Never argued. But I remember my mom once hinting that Sarah didn't know how to manage things, about how a daughter-in-law should be. Could my mother have had some hidden motive? No, my mother is a kind, simple woman. It couldn't be. What about the cleaning lady? We had a part-time cleaner named Maria, an immigrant. She was gentle and hardworking. Sarah liked her a lot. But did she have a motive? Or did someone hire her? I remembered a few days ago, Maria had asked for a few days off to go back to her home country. She said her mother was sick. Was that true? I opened my eyes and looked up at the ceiling. The rain had seeped through a crack, leaving a yellow, stained patch. I looked at the corner of the room where Sarah often sat knitting. She would sit there, smiling, saying she was knitting me a scarf for the winter. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to that image, but it faded, replaced by the pale face of her under the tree, her hand clutching that note. The note. I suddenly remembered. In my panic, I had given it to the doctor. It was at the hospital. What did it say? I had only skimmed it, seeing the words, "I'm sorry. My mom is very sick. Afraid you'd worry." But was there anything else? Was anyone mentioned? A name? I tried to remember, but I couldn't. My mind felt numb. Then I thought of the neighbors. Mr. Johnson from next door often came over, asking after Sarah. He seemed nice, but sometimes I felt he stared at my wife a little too long. Or Mrs. Henderson across the hall. She was a gossip, always saying bad things about Sarah to the other neighbors. Could she have been jealous, wanting to harm her? I held my head in my hands. The thoughts rushed at me like a tornado. Every person I thought of, I found a reason to suspect, then immediately dismissed it, blaming myself for thinking so ill of them. They were family, good neighbors. How could they? But if it wasn't them, then who? Someone from the outside who snuck into our house in the middle of the night and put something in the food? The cigarette butt on the balcony, the strand of hair, those things couldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Someone was here. Someone was very close to my wife. The very night she went out on the balcony, I looked up at my sister's room. The door was still closed. What was she doing in there? Sleeping? Or was she worried? Scared? Or was she on the phone? Reporting to someone? I stood up, about to go upstairs. But then I sat back down. No. David told me not to do anything. To wait. I sat back down on the sofa, my face in my hands, and tears started to fall again. I felt pity for my wife. I hated myself, and I was scared. Scared of the truth. If it came out, I would have to face another loved one in this house. Scared that the line between family and enemy was so thin. My phone buzzed. I jumped, looking at the screen. It was David. My heart pounded. I answered, my hand trembling. "David, do you have the results?" On the other end, David's voice was grim. "Yeah, I have them. Stay put. I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, David arrived. He walked in, soaking wet from the rain. But his face was composed, his eyes sharp. Looking at him, I knew something important had happened. David sat down across from me, saying nothing, just pulling a sealed envelope from his jacket pocket. "The lab results are here. I just got them this afternoon." David placed the envelope on the table and looked at me. My trembling hand reached for it, but I didn't open it right away. I looked at David, pleading. "Just tell me, what's in it?" David sighed, his voice low. "In the water glass you gave me, there are traces of the same industrial chemical the doctor found in your wife's blood. The concentration is low, but it's enough to be conclusive." My heart felt like it had stopped. "And the strand of hair?" David looked at me. "After a DNA analysis, the hair matches someone I don't think you'd expect." I swallowed. "Who?" David didn't answer right away. He looked around the house, then asked quietly, "Where's your sister?" I pointed upstairs. "In her room. Hasn't come down since this afternoon?" David nodded. "Good. Let her stay there." Then he pulled his chair closer to me and lowered his voice. "This hair, I had it cross-referenced with the database. It's not your sister's, not your mother's, or anyone in your family. It belongs to a woman named Jessica Miller, 32 years old, from Indiana." I was stunned. Jessica Miller? I've never heard that name before. Who is she? David looked at me, his eyes full of meaning. "You may not know her, but your sister does. Jessica Miller is your sister's best friend from high school. They were very close, in the same class, from the same town." I was speechless. My sister's friend? But why was her hair on our balcony? When was she here? David shrugged. That's what I don't know yet. But there's a more important detail. Jessica Miller currently works at an agricultural chemical supply company. This place specializes in producing industrial chemicals, including the one we found in your wife's blood. A cold chill ran through me. Sweat beaded on my forehead. You mean she took the chemical from her workplace? David nodded. It's very likely. And someone let her into your house, gave her the opportunity to get close to your wife? That person has to be someone in the house, familiar with the family's routine, who knows the schedule, knows what your wife eats and drinks. I looked upstairs, where my sister's room was. My sister? David held up a hand to stop me. Don't jump to conclusions yet. I have people monitoring Jessica Miller. If she's the direct perpetrator, there has to be a mastermind behind her. And that person is very likely the one who let her in, the one who has a motive against your wife. I looked at David, my vision blurring. What motive? My wife is a good person. She's never hurt anyone. David was silent for a moment, then said, I've checked your sister's call history for the past few days. It's Jessica Miller's number, and their last call was at 1:01 p.m. on the night it happened, right before your wife went out onto the balcony. I thought I had misheard. 11 p.m.? You mean right at that time? David nodded. Yes. And about 30 minutes after that call, a woman wearing a hat and a mask was caught on the security camera of the convenience store at the end of your street, walking into your alley. About an hour later, she left. I trembled, speechless. David looked at me, his voice tense. I need you to stay calm. We have a clear lead, but to reach a final conclusion, we need more evidence. I'm going to request a warrant to search Jessica Miller's place and bring your sister in for questioning. I sat there, stunned, looking upstairs. The door to my sister's room was still closed. In the quiet house, I could only hear my own heart pounding. David stood up and patted my shoulder. Stay here. Don't do anything. I'll be back as soon as I have news. He opened the door and left, leaving me alone in the darkness with the name that had just been mentioned, Jessica Miller. I sat there, looking up the stairs, my mind a chaotic mess. Jessica Miller. The name echoed in my ears. My sister's best friend. The person who might have put poison in my wife's food. But my sister, was she involved? Or was she just an unwitting pawn? Lost in thought, I heard a door open upstairs. The sound of familiar footsteps. My sister was coming down the stairs, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at me, then around the living room, as if searching for something. Is David gone? She asked, her voice trembling. I heard you talking. I looked at her without answering. I just stared into those eyes, at that face. The face of the sister I had loved and respected for 30 years. My sister grew uneasy under my gaze. Why are you looking at me like that? Is something wrong? I took a deep breath, then spoke, my voice strangely calm. Karen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. My sister froze, her face turning pale. What? What is it? I stood up and walked towards her. I looked directly into her eyes, unblinking. Do you know a Jessica Miller? My sister's whole body trembled, her lips moved, but no sound came out. After a moment, she stammered, Jessica, she's my friend. Why are you asking? I kept my eyes fixed on hers. The night it happened with Sarah, was she here? My sister took a step back, leaning against the wall, her face white. No, she wasn't. Why would she be here? Her voice cracked, trembling. I pulled the envelope David had left from my pocket and took out the plastic bag with the strand of hair. This hair was found on our balcony that night. They did a DNA test. It belongs to Jessica Miller. I held the hair up in front of her. Explain this. Why was your friend's hair on our balcony in the middle of the night? My sister looked at the hair, her eyes wide with panic. She shook her head frantically. No, it can't be. Jessica wouldn't. I don't know. I took another step closer, my voice starting to choke. What else don't you know? Did you know there was poison in my wife's blood? The same poison your best friend has access to every day at her job. Did you know that? My sister collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands, Her shoulders shook, but she made no sound. I stood there, looking at her, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed. Tell me, did you let her into our house? Did you help her put something in Sarah's food? Why? What did Sarah ever do to you? My sister dropped her hands from her face and looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. In those eyes, I could see fear, but there was something else too. A torment, a pain I couldn't name. I didn't know it would turn out like this, Jessica said. She said it would just make her a little weak, so she wouldn't be a burden on you anymore. She said she had a way to help me, to help you. I was stunned. Make her weak? Not a burden? What are you talking about? Who's a burden on me? She was taking your money. She was making you miserable. I saw you working day and night, and she was just taking everything. I was worried about you. I just wanted what was best for you. I stumbled back, not believing my ears. What's best for me? You wanted what was best for me, so you harmed my wife? My mind was reeling. I looked at my sister, the sister I adored, with the eyes of a stranger. I whispered, "Do you know what Sarah was using that money for? For her mother's medical bills? She's seriously ill. She needed surgery. Sarah was afraid to worry me, so she kept it a secret, sending small amounts whenever she could. She was struggling, she was worried, but she never complained once." My sister looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Her lips moved, but she couldn't speak. I looked at her, tears starting to stream down my face. "And you? You listened to your friend and harmed my wife. Do you know that night, she took sleeping pills to kill herself? She was going to die from the shame, the pain, from thinking her own husband didn't trust her. She almost died. Do you know that?" My sister broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know," Jessica said. She said it was just a little bit, that it wouldn't be a big deal. I pushed her hand away. "Not a big deal? My wife is in the emergency room with poison in her system. And you say it's not a big deal?" I turned my back to her, not wanting to look at her anymore. I looked up at the balcony, where my wife had sat in the cold night with a broken heart. Then I looked down at my own hands, the hands that had locked that door. The two of us, my sister and I, in our own ways, had pushed her to the edge. My sister's trembling voice came from behind me. "Michael, I know I was wrong, but Jessica." I turned back to look at her. "What about Jessica?" My sister swallowed, her eyes filled with panic. "Jessica, she wasn't just doing what I asked. She had her own motives," she said. "She said that Sarah was the one who killed her brother 3 years ago." I froze, as if someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water on me. My wife killed Jessica Miller's brother? Since when? I had never heard Sarah mention anything like that. I looked at my sister, pressing her. "What are you talking about? Tell me everything." My sister, trembling, told me the story, her voice broken. 3 years ago, Jessica's brother had a work accident. He worked at the same factory as Sarah before you two got married. Back then, Sarah was a factory worker at the same place. After the accident, he died, Jessica's family said. They said it was because Sarah didn't follow the safety procedures, and it led to his death. I remembered that before we got married, Sarah had worked in a factory for a few years, but she never told me about any accident. I only knew she quit because the company downsized. It turned out there was such a dark chapter in her past, my sister continued. Jessica said her family sued Sarah, but there wasn't enough evidence. The case was dismissed. They've held a grudge for 3 years. When I confided in Jessica about the money, about Sarah taking your money, Jessica said, "See, I told you so. That woman killed my brother, and now she's hurting your brother. She needs to be taught a lesson." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. A lesson. They called poisoning someone, driving them to the brink of suicide. A lesson. I looked at my sister, the sister I loved, trembling as she recounted everything. My heart ached, not with anger at her, but with a deeper pain, the pain of realizing how hatred can blind people. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness, 2 images appeared. One was my wife, a gentle, shy girl who worried about her family. The other was Jessica Miller, a woman who had carried the pain of losing her brother for 3 years, waiting for a chance for revenge. Who was the real victim? Sarah. If she was at fault, it might have been unintentional or due to circumstances. And Jessica, the victim of the past, had now become the perpetrator of the present. A vicious cycle of hatred breeding hatred. And I was standing in the middle of that cycle, with half my heart for my wife, and the other half tormented by what my sister had done. My sister collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I just thought it would just make her a little weak, so she couldn't drain you anymore." I didn't know Jessica had another motive. She said it was just a little bit, that it was fine. I was so stupid, Michael. I looked at her, my heart breaking. I knew she loved me, that she was worried about my struggles, but that love, when exploited by hatred, had become a murder weapon. I couldn't blame her entirely, nor could I forgive her easily. I just stood there, watching her cry, watching the pieces of our family shatter. I looked up at the mantelpiece, where a photo of my father sat. He was smiling kindly in the black and white frame. My father had taught me that family is everything, that we must love and protect each other. Dad, can you see this? That love has torn our family apart today. I turned to my sister, my voice choked. Karen, do you know that if that night, instead of listening to Jessica, you had sat down and talked to me, talked to Sarah, things would have been different? Sarah could have explained, I could have understood, and you wouldn't have been used. My sister looked up at me, her eyes red, speechless. I continued, hatred is blind, Karen. It makes people unable to see what's right, unable to hear the voice of reason. Jessica was blinded by hatred, and you were blinded by love. You were both wrong. My sister broke down, sobbing, clutching my legs. Michael, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I bent down and put my hand on her shoulder, saying nothing. Outside, the rain was still falling. The room was shrouded in darkness and tears. I looked out at the balcony, where my wife had sat in the cold night with a broken heart. I wondered, if from the very beginning, someone in this family had been willing to talk to each other honestly, would that night have happened? If I had been willing to ask my wife about the money, instead of being silent and suspicious, if my sister had been willing to ask me about Sarah's situation, instead of listening to her friend's instigation, if Jessica Miller had been willing to meet my wife and find out the truth about what happened 3 years ago, instead of harboring a grudge, maybe none of this would have happened. But life has no what-ifs. What happened cannot be changed. All that's left is a bitter lesson for all of us. The next morning, I went to the hospital very early. The hallway was quiet, only the sound of my footsteps echoing on the cold tile floor. The smell of disinfectant was still strong, as always. But today, it stung my eyes. I stopped in front of my wife's room, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't dare to open it. I had prepared a long speech. I would apologize to her. I would tell her everything I had found out. I would tell her that I loved her, that I believed her, that I would be by her side forever. But when the door opened, all those words vanished. Sarah was lying there on the white hospital bed. Her face was gaunt and pale, her eyes closed. A tangle of plastic tubes connected her to the machines around her. The ventilator hissed rhythmically, each breath like a countdown. I stood at the door, not daring to step in. Then her eyes slowly opened. She looked at me, saying nothing, just looking. That look, I can't describe it. Not angry, not resentful, not hurt. It was empty. As if she had gone very far away, and now only her body remained on the bed. I walked towards her, each step heavy. I pulled up a plastic chair and sat down beside her. I reached out to take her hand, but she pulled it back. A very slight movement, but I felt my heart clench. I lowered my head, not daring to look at her anymore. Sarah, I started, but my voice was hoarse. I'm sorry. My wife was silent. I looked up at her. She was still looking at me with that empty gaze. Then she closed her eyes and turned her face to the wall. A single tear rolled down her cheek, fell onto the pillow, and soaked into the white fabric. I sat there, watching that tear, my heart aching. I wanted to hug her, to tell her how much I loved her, but I couldn't. Her silence was the only answer. It told me that what had happened could never be erased. The wound was too deep. Any apology was just salt in it. I sat there for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, I don't know. I just sat there, looking at my wife's small back, listening to the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. In my mind, 1,000 questions arose. Would she forgive me? Could we go back to how we were? Then I realized I was asking selfish questions. I was only thinking about myself, about my feelings. What about her? What had she endured? I said softly, my voice a whisper in the quiet room. I know now. I know everything. About the money you sent to your mom, about the Greens, and about Jessica Miller. Her shoulders trembled slightly. After a moment, she turned back to look at me. This time, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Not hope, but shock. She looked at me, her dry, chapped lips moving. After a moment, she managed to say one sentence, her voice as faint as a whisper. Do you know what really happened with her brother 3 years ago? I shook my head. My wife closed her eyes again, another tear rolling down. She spoke, each word weak but clear. That day, I tried to save him. I pulled him out of the danger zone, but it was too late. I still have the scar on my hand from a piece of glass. She held up her thin hand, pointing to a faint scar below her wrist. I can never forget his death. But she never believed me. I stared at my wife, at that scar. So for the past 3 years, she had not only carried the grief of losing a colleague, but also the resentment of his family. She had tried to save someone, but was accused of killing them. And now, I, her husband, had also doubted her. I took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. I held her thin, trembling hand, buried my face in her palm, and I cried like a child. A week later, everything came to light. Jessica Miller was arrested at her workplace. In her apartment, the police found a bottle of the same industrial chemical that was in my wife's blood. She confessed to everything. 3 years of harboring a grudge, finally paid for with a suspended sentence, because her actions did not result in death, and there were mitigating circumstances. But a suspended sentence wasn't the end of it. She would carry that conviction for life, and a stain on her name that could never be washed away. My sister, as an accomplice, was brought in for questioning many times. In the end, she was not charged, as she did not know the full danger of the chemical and had cooperated fully with the investigation. But she couldn't stay in our house. Every time she saw my wife, she would cry and tremble. A month later, she asked to go back to her hometown to live with our elderly mother. I saw her off at the bus station. We hugged and cried, unable to speak. She said she would be back when she felt better. I knew that when could be a very long time, or never. Our house became empty. At every meal, there were only 2 of us. My wife spoke less than before. She still cooked, cleaned, and smiled at me. But that smile was no longer as radiant as it used to be. It was like a faint, distant shadow. Many nights, I would wake up to find her sitting alone on the balcony, looking down. I would go out and sit with her, not daring to ask anything, just sitting there with her in the cold wind. The balcony, where all the tragedy began, had now become our shared nightmare. On clear nights, we would often sit there. My wife would look at the railing, where her shoe print was still visible from that fateful night. I would look at her, my heart aching. I knew she was looking back at the past, at the most desperate moment of her life. Once, I asked quietly, "Do you forgive me?" She was silent for a long time, then turned to look at me. In her eyes, I saw a deep sadness, but also a flicker of warmth. She didn't answer, just placed her hand on mine. A gentle squeeze. But I understood. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It was acceptance. Acceptance to keep living. Acceptance that the wound was still there. Acceptance that we would have to live with it for the rest of our lives. David, my best friend, still visited from time to time. He told me that after Jessica Miller was released, she left town and disappeared. Her family also avoided everyone, ashamed. My sister, back in her hometown, went to church every day, praying for forgiveness for her sins. My mother would call, her voice trembling, asking after her daughter-in-law. She said, "I'm so ashamed. Tell your wife I'm sorry." I passed on the message. My wife just smiled sadly, saying nothing. Yesterday, I went out onto the balcony alone. The air was cool, the first winds of autumn blowing gently. I looked down at the sycamore tree. The leaves were starting to turn yellow. I looked up at the gray sky and wondered, does my wife still see any blue? Or are her eyes now only filled with the gray of the past? I heard the sound of slippers behind me. My wife came out, holding 2 cups of hot tea. She handed one to me, then leaned against the railing, looking out into the distance. We stood there in silence, watching the first drops of rain begin to fall. The tea in my hand was hot, but a part of me was still cold. Cold from the losses that could never be recovered, cold from the wounds that could never heal. My wife spoke softly, her voice like a wisp of smoke. "Michael, let's move." I turned to look at her. She was still looking out into the distance, her eyes red. "I can't stay here forever. Every time I come out onto the balcony, I remember." I nodded, squeezing her hand tightly. "Okay, let's move. Anywhere you want to go, I'll go with you." The rain began to fall harder. We went back inside, closing the glass door. Through the rain-streaked glass, the balcony was a blur. A part of our lives had died there. But I knew we would go on, living with the scars, with the lessons, and with each other, because after everything, we still had each other. Writing these lines, my hands are still shaking, not from the cold, but because what happened is still there, a dull ache in every part of me. I want to tell you about the lessons that no school can teach. Only life, in the most brutal way, can force you to learn them. Lesson 1. Never judge without knowing the whole story. I looked at the numbers in the bank account, at my sister's words, and I concluded that my wife was a thief. I didn't ask, I didn't investigate, I didn't give her a chance. It turned out that behind those numbers was the fear of a daughter about to lose her mother. Behind her silence was the fear of worrying her husband. I had judged when I only knew a fraction of the truth, and the price of that haste was almost the life of the person I loved most. Lesson 2. Hatred solves nothing. It only breeds more hatred. Jessica Miller held a grudge for 3 years. She thought that revenge would bring her peace. But in the end, she lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, and the last shred of compassion in her heart. And we, the ones left behind, have to bear the emotional scars for the rest of our lives. If she had been able to sit down and talk to my wife 3 years ago, maybe things would have been different, but hatred had blinded her. Lesson 3. Love also needs wisdom. My sister loved me. She worried about my struggles, about my wife taking my money. But that love lacked wisdom, lacked understanding. It was exploited by someone evil. She thought she was protecting her younger brother, but she was actually pushing him into a tragedy. Love is not enough. You have to know how to listen, how to put yourself in someone else's shoes, how to ask before you act. Lesson 4. Family is where we are most vulnerable. Because we trust completely, when doubt appears, it hurts more than any wound from the outside. I had doubted my wife. My wife had doubted herself. My sister had doubted the kindness of others. And all that doubt, combined with hatred from the outside, almost destroyed my family. My friends, in every family, there are things left unsaid. Worries, burdens, silent sacrifices. My wife had sacrificed, endured in silence, because she was afraid to worry me. I didn't see those sacrifices. My sister didn't see those worries. And we all paid the price. I look at my wife now. Every day is a struggle for her to keep going. The wound in her heart may never fully heal. It will always be there. A dull ache, a reminder of a cold winter night, of a locked balcony door, of the sleeping pills that entered her body. But she is still here. She still holds my hand. She still tries every day. And for me, that is enough. The last lesson I learned is that sometimes forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but about accepting to live with it and choosing to move forward together. So, in your home, is there someone who is suffering in silence? Is there a pain that you don't know about? Don't wait until it's too late to realize that happiness is more fragile than you think. This afternoon, I went out onto the balcony again. To look at the plants my wife still cares for. To see the last weak rays of sunlight through the railing. The balcony is no longer a place of nightmares for me. It is a reminder of how fragile happiness is, how silence can kill a soul, how one moment of foolishness can make you lose the most precious thing. My wife is still inside, still cooking, still waiting for me. Every day, we are learning to heal together. It's not easy, but we have each other. If this story has touched you, please pause for a moment. Look at your own home. Is there someone who is suffering in silence? Is there a pain that you have never asked about? Don't wait until it's too late. Thank you for listening to my story.